It's good to clear things up. But wait, did anybody get it? We were talking about self-referral. Now I started off right then, talking about something that we'd done, and I had to keep saying that I was there. And hi. We're continuing to talk about man, and especially his intellectual secondary world as a self-referring system. And we were last noting how opinions and points of view, that being non-judgmental, that being in no way based upon bias, etc., but opinions and points of view being the proper and usually the only food available or necessary for his intellectual operations, and how all opinions and points of view are products of collective thinking. Is that where we stop? Since no one objects. For those of you who can't see, I was looking at no one. See, I just looked off, and there's no one there. I don't want you to think that we're trying to fool you with cheap props. All right. Regarding, you recall, collective thinking, and I'll admit, if it's necessary, that this gets a little sticky because it sounds so straightforward. But in regards to the collective thinking and opinions and points of view, notice that the individual mind cannot develop opinions which amount to ordinary mentation on its own. Now, this falls right into previously undiagnosed cracks in the very place that men have been intellectually playing for years and years and years and years and years. Over the relative merits, the relative value, the proportional effect of man's hereditary base, and then man's environmental influences. And we have already established the ultimate stupid test for that. Because if you can ever read, if any of you people, please don't tell us here. Notice I said us. I don't know what that means, but please don't tell us that if any of you still fail this test, that you can be reading, no matter how persuasive, no matter how intellectual, no matter how impressive may seem to be the article, the debate, the observations of others who point out again. And I can just make it up, but you can make it up, and you don't even have to. All you got to do is open up your ears, open up your eyes. But if someone's saying, well, there's no doubt that the genetic base of human life has a very valid role in our development. But, and then they go on. How do you explain the fact that a child who was a product of 4 generations of priests turned into, something horrible, an attorney or a serial killer? Or they may take a converse view, according to which is their better side. The stupid test is, at any time, if you will go, you have failed. That is, you have succeeded because, well, you've heard all the arguments because your own brain responds to it, and I can do it. But you can take either position to start with and say, human life is no more than absolute mechanical genetics, and we are just simply what our genes tell us we are. And I don't have to carry on, especially if I talk louder. And you can prove that position, or anybody can prove that position. A comic strip. And you go, yes, yes. And you can turn right around, pick up another article, another comic strip, another cartoon, and it says, it certainly plays some, they always have to throw this in. They'll say genetics certainly plays some role because your hair color can be shown. If we could dig up the monk and all of his peas, and he could prove to you that your hair color, the size of your nose, your race, your height, that is absolutely, in part, determined by your ancestors. But, Beyond that, beyond your size and your skin color and your hair color and all that, beyond that, which, that's almost of no consequence to us educated, sophisticated, debonair boys and girls. When you get into the intellectual, the world of personality, hey, give me a break. Because we all know, and then they can come out with any story they want, and you may feel as though, yes, I am one of those stories. That how do you explain the fact that so-and-so happened to this child? You cannot explain it genetically. It's environmental. And if you go, hey, I'm going to have to think about that. You have failed. Don't wait for Alec Trebek or somebody to ring a bell. You have failed. Failed, which is succeed. Back to collective thinking, and there was a purpose to that side trip because this gets extremely blah, blah, blah. The human mind individually cannot develop opinions. And reminding you one more time that that's a gym clip. That this has nothing to do with what ordinary people think of as prejudicial, biased, one-sided views of things. That's not what opinions are. Opinions are ordinary. The reason I'm laying on this is ordinary mentation. Remember that there is a place. Kyroot said it, and I will quote only him. There is a place where speculation is fact. Everybody lives in that place. So opinion, points of view, are in no way less than what ordinary people call serious knowledge, or whatever they call it. Because what they call serious knowledge is, of course, their opinion. It may be the collective opinion, but it is opinion nonetheless because it is always self-referring. How do you know that's true? And they have to refer to themselves in some way. And I don't mean they have to say, well, I discovered it. No. That's very rare. Then they're an expert. Then they've got to whine in a more acute manner. Most people don't want that responsibility. They say, well, the way I know it is I went to Harvard. I went to the University of Mississippi. I studied with so-and-so. Or I read a book. It has to be in some way, or they say, who are you talking to? It's what it always amounts to. All of ordinary human knowledge is self-referring. It has to be. But now consider, no individual mind can develop its own. The human mind, here comes the sticky part, must be nurtured. Well, now don't fall into it now. Don't fail the test again. Oh, wait a minute. That means that environment does play some role. Ring the gong, ring the gong. Get the hook. Dig up Colonel Bowles. That's too old. Ted Mack. The Gong Show. You have failed miserably, I might say. But now listen. The intellect in its development must be fed, and the only food available ordinarily is opinion. And the mind cannot develop opinion by itself, individually. The mind, the intellect, the secondary world of man, must be nurtured in a way not dissimilar to the body. Does anybody still going to say, wait a minute, then that means environment does count for something? All right, I'm going to level with you. Yes and no. Primarily, no. All right, I'm going to level with you. Primarily no, and less than primarily no, and then I should just tell you the truth, no. Except for this. See, the key is collectively, and the key is when you're dealing with a finite environment and you're attempting to look at it with finite eyes, you always come to this. If we were, for the sake of a quick mapping, again at the primary level, point out the undeniable similarities between man and his fellow creatures on this planet, in this finite landscape. In the same way that you must be nurtured, in the same way that a fox, a young duckling, in the same way that the body must be nurtured. I mean, at that level, no one, outside of some sort of anomalous conditions, no one gives any particular notice to the fact that you must be nurtured. Almost all other creatures on this planet need some form of physical nurturing to survive, whether it be that they need their mother and their family or their father or somebody for a few hours, or a few days, a few months, years in the case of elephants and young attorneys. All right, accountants, bus drivers. I shouldn't have said that. No one questions, there's nothing strange, and no one tries to consider some argument between nurturing and naturing, between environment and heredity. They would just say, well, that is a natural instinct. That is the healthy genes of this species of animal, or if we were talking about man at the strictly physical level, it is simply the wisdom of his genes. The genetics of the human race makes a mother want to protect a child, make a father jump out and try to protect a child in case of a roaring bus driver coming at him. So there is no doubt, everyone knows this. A child must be nurtured. A human child would physically die if you just laid him out in the woods. So he must be nurtured. And no one questions that, well, wait a minute, is that an environmentally produced motivation that a mother says, well, and then she would describe in some way how her parents had influenced her, how the orphanage had influenced her if she didn't have parents, how she was influenced by the advertising of her day and made her grow up in such a way that when she had a child, she thought, by God, I'm going to look after it. Until it gets old enough to look after itself. No one questions that, all right? The human mind. And all the sticky part, because now when you bring the mind into it, it begins to go. It wants to shoot its cuffs and go, well, now we're getting somewhere. And you start talking about nurturing and try to say it's got nothing to do with environment. Then the mind begins to say, I'll be the judge of that. I'll listen to what you say, but then I'll decide. Quite unlike the liver. You send the liver down some good bile, or at least the basis for some good bile, and the liver goes, hey. It doesn't say, where's this coming from? It doesn't say, well, I'll decide whether this meets my strict requirements. But once you revive the mind, once you say, all right, we'll speak about the mind, then the superfluous part is to say, we'll speak about the mind and to the mind. Because if you're going to speak about the mind, you're speaking to the mind. Either that or you got a liver going. So as soon as you start that, the mind does go, all right, okay. Because then you've got it going, you've got the world open for, in that secondary level, opinions and points of view. So no matter what you say, that, wait a minute, I'm going to tell you a simple, direct fact. Now, if you say that to the liver, you can do something, or the kidneys. Or to an animal that has no intellect. But once you say to this, all right, I'm going to tell you a simple, direct fact, the most truthful, undeniable fact in the world that anybody's ever heard. A minute ago. Okay, we'll see. Because that's the nature of the mind. That is, it's going to say, well, I'll listen to your damn opinion, and then I'll give you my opinion. No matter what it says. And if you said, listen, this is the voice of Zeus speaking to you. I've picked you out amongst all the little squirrels, people, and I decided to give you a special message. The human mind goes, okay. And just hopes that God didn't see you kind of wink going, yeah, well, let's see. Tell me what it is, and I'll decide whether I'm hallucinating, whether I've had too much coffee, and whether my shorts are too tight. But I don't, all right, let me hear it. Because that's all it can do. So back to the sticky part. This must be nurtured in the same way the body. But as soon as you would say that to ordinary people, it would be so obvious they wouldn't know where you were going, but if I'd done this little build-up for ordinary people, they'd go, wait a minute. Now you're about to admit that environment does play some role, because it has to be the environment to nurture the mind, because that's not natural. That's not as natural as the body growing up and needing food and shelter. This could go in all kinds of directions. And so the nurturing of it is absolutely open to chance, or it's open to change, because if you grew up over here under X conditions, with this family, or if you grew up in the Y conditions, if you were suddenly, no matter who you were genetically, If they grabbed you and kidnapped you and dropped you off in Madagascar, or conversely took you to outer Mongolia and you grew up, this would be different. The mind has got you. I mean, if you're an ordinary mind, because that's all you can dance with. You dance with it and you think, Jesus, I didn't know a tar baby could dress up and end up on a dance floor and trick me into dancing again. It's no trick. It's all you got to dance with. The nurturing of the human mind, I went through all this, and I am loath to be crude enough, to be insulting enough to tell you the punchline, because the punchline is already there. So I won't. Well, those of you who can hear it's already heard what I'm saying, so let me we'll pretend we kind of stepped off sideways. We're toward the edge of the dance floor. The same way that the human body must be physically nurtured, the secondary intellectual world of man must also be. But it is done collectively. It is not dissimilar to the nurturing of the human body at the physical level. It is done collectively. It is a product of whatever your opinion is. All right, I will get a little cruder. Whatever it turns out to apparently be your personality, which is no more than this. This is a product of collective thinking. You physically are a product of the pride, if you were a lion. The collective lionness of where you grew up. Because, again, if you were a sane, large cat, that is, to wit, a lion, you would have grown up amongst lions. You would not have wandered off and thought, boy, I'm sick of this place. I'm going to go find me a bunch of hyenas, like I'll convert to another religion. You would only be raised by lions. And if you wander away from lions and find yourself surrounded by jackals or dentists, you'd go, no. You would quite properly, in a healthy way, you would go back to where the lions were. It's not open to choice, remember. The primary level is not dealing with any idea of freedom, change, choice. But collectively, the mind would say it would be different. I am not simply a product if I'm a lion. Or me physically, if we're cutting my little line of the primary and the secondary world of man, from here down, I'm a man, small limb, and it doesn't matter where I grew up. I would still be a man, and I would still be a product if I was born in Iceland, and for some reason I was kidnapped and raised in Argentina. I would still come up looking like my parents looked. They can't change that. They could, paint a mustache on me and part my hair in the middle and teach me to do the tango. But I would still end up, I'd be the only guy there on the tango floor with blonde hair and blue eyes. And speaking, like. Don't any Norwegians write me, it was just a joke. People in Reykjavik don't speak that bad anyway. At any rate, the ordinary intellect would tell you that they can move me physically somewhere else, and I was still, genes well out, we can't stop that. But then when it if it heard me say, the mind is also a product, is also nurtured collectively. You cannot give the ordinary mind the ball there and say, all right, run with it, because it'll stop and say there's nowhere to go because you have just ruined the play. You have denied what you said, and it's not true. This is nurtured, but it's nurtured collectively. Everything that this knows at the ordinary level is a product of, is based on, is an output of collective thinking. And then any question about, but then you've got to consider, you're going to have to face up to it, old man, referring to me, as to where the person's mind grew up, because wherever the collective thinking is that you're saying it's a product thereof would change. If we were in Borneo or if we were in Mexico, it would be different. All right, let's get technical then. I'll respond to that. So what? This is still, if we live long enough, leading to something else that is way out at a strange corner that I think will tie it into altogether for some of you. I don't know when we'll ever get there. But it has to do with the fact that just what I said would seem to be undeniable folly. It would almost sound, if you listen with at least one ordinary ear, that we're contradicting ourselves. That there would have to be a difference. It sound like I even insinuated, or how can I hide it, that there would be a difference between the intellectual personalities and intellectual life, the artistic life, the cultural life of people in Borneo as opposed to people in Canada or Mexico. I mean, just anybody knows that. So then, if you grew up, even if you were born in Borneo of Borneonian parents, and they surreptitiously whisked you away to Mexico, and you grew up there under a completely different culture and environment, you would not think in the same way. You would not have the same personality as you would if you had grown up where you were born. I mean, how could anybody say otherwise? Except, see, there's a place beyond that. That's not correct, but let's follow me. Let's say it is correct. Now back to my technical response, which was no form of cynicism or sarcasm, as you should know. Even if it's true, which is not. I mean, it's not a full telling of what's going on. But even if it were true, the response is, so what? What does that change? But at the ordinary level, people go, what does that change? My good man, it changes everything. Well, I hate to do this, but there's still another technical response to that. That's not true, what they said, that changes everything. But if it does, the follow-up response is, get ready. So what? Now, of course, if there were any potential for ordinary people, along about now was my little piece of cheap dramatics, but along about then they would go. And of course they won't, because the ordinary mind goes, what? Now, this is nuttier than I thought. At a level at which energy is polar based, which is all that's ordinarily available or necessary in a three-dimensional environment, at that level, any statement you make to this, which is run on polarized energy and dreaming otherwise, that is as limited, this is, as your colon. But the reason it is different from the colon is it can dream otherwise. It can dream outside of, shall we say, somewhat messier, odious regions. But to tell it that you are as subject to the laws of energy, the workings, the mechanisms of the transferings of energy as every other part of your body, yes, yes, yes. To tell it that, and it go, yes, yes, is that all? And you say, well, that's a comma. Work on that. And it goes, I don't really have to work on it. Is that it? Because if you say, no matter what you are from here down, what you would be at the primary, you must be nurtured. Yes, yes, yes. And you cannot change the color of your skin. No, no, no. You cannot change the color of your hair. No, no, no. You can't change the color of your eyes. No. You can't change the shape of your nose based upon your parents. And yeah. And you cannot change anything else. And the mind goes. Now, for thousands of years, the mind has already correctly rejected that. You all know that. It just periodically, in your lifetime, it's bounced back. It's just a little hobby. It bounced back up with sociobiology 4 or 5 years ago. And it was all the rage for what? A couple of months. Well, enough to make the lead articles in all the news magazines and Psychology Today or what. You know, and then most people now, if you mention sociobiology, they go, what? Because it's just it's just a fad. It's a debate. It's not reality. It's a theory. It's a thesis, really. No. But at any rate. And if you tell it that no matter what would be your accepted views of the power, the inescapable hold of genetics on the body, yes, there is the same sort of conditions, not at all dissimilar to your intellect. No. Because if an ordinary person could see that, if an ordinary mind could see that, it would be suicidal. It would be the end of that particular line intellectually. We're gone. Next time, maybe.